YouTube is preparing to live stream. Meeting of Planning Policy and Regeneration Scheme is live now.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our meeting this evening. Have we any apologies for absence, please?
With no apologies received today.
Thank you. And what about declarations of interest? Anybody got anything to tell us? Nothing exciting. Right, we'll move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'd like to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 2nd of December 2020. Do you agree to the minutes, or is there anything you'd like to say? Are you all in agreement? Please show me your hands.
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you very much. I don't have any urgent business, and I don't really have any announcements at all. So shall we get on with item 6, which is Ashton Neighbourhood Plan. And what we want to do is for you to consider the neighbourhood plan and to recommend whether we wish it to proceed to referendum. And I think, Alan, wherever I can find you, Alan, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Item 6 is the Ashton Neighbourhood Plan, which is the 4th neighbourhood plan to come before the council, seeking approval to move to referendum stage. Neighbourhood plan, as you all know, produced by the village, by the parish, for the parish. It's the work of a dedicated group of residents of Ashton Parish, with some guidance from the council's planning policy team, but very much a body of work by the parish on behalf of the parish council, which commenced way back in 2015. Last spring, the plan was submitted for independent examination, which commenced in April. In November last year, we received the report of the examiner, which concluded that the plan, as submitted to them, meets the basic conditions and tests it needs to, meets the statutory requirements, and subject to some few modifications, can proceed to the next stage in the adoption process, which is referendum, public referendum. The council is now required to consider the examiner's reports and those modifications and determine whether it feels that the plan should indeed progress to that referendum. If it goes to referendum, then a 50% or more positive vote in favour of adopting the plan would see the plan becoming part of the development plan for South Northamptonshire. As I said, the plan was endorsed by the independent examiner. Officers have no reason, having considered the examiner's report and the modification proposed in that, to seek to disagree with the view of the examiner. We feel the plan is sound and does meet those tests, and are happy for it to proceed to referendum. Normally, the plan would go straight to referendum, and that has to be held within the statutory time period. Unfortunately, COVID has meant that there are some delays to that, and indeed the government has issued some additional guidance. So something else to be mindful of this evening in making the decision is, once we agree, if we do agree that the plan will go to referendum, we can give the plan significant weight in the development management process. That's something that the government has introduced over the last few months in recognition of the COVID pandemic, and not wishing to slow down neighbourhood planning and the usefulness of neighbourhood planning documents. So we would, recommendation is that members endorse the plan to move to referendum, and at the same time noting that the plan would be given significant weight in the planning process. So meeting is recommended to approve modifications set out by the examiner of the Ashton Neighbourhood Plan, Appendix 1 of the reports, and agree that the plan, including those modifications, should proceed to referendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan, very much. I understand that the ward member, John Budden, has been, you've consulted with him as well, haven't you?
That's correct, yes.
And he has no problems with it.
He's got no objections to raise on this, no.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, have you got any comments that you'd like to make on the Ashton plan? Nice little village. Anybody like to say anything? Elaine.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've read it through, and I think basically most of the alterations are sort of to do with the way it's written rather than anything else. And I think really it's just a tidying up of it. I think it's a very good report, and I think that the neighbourhood plan is very good as well. I think it's well written now with these amendments. So I'm quite happy to recommend that we go for the referendum on it later if anybody else is happy.
Right. Anybody else? Thank you, Elaine. Anybody else like to have a say about it? Bob.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I completely agree with Councillor Wiltshire. It's a very succinct, well-written paper, and much on a line as most of these independent examiners' reports are. With professional help, villages, the community really sort of pull together and create a substantial paper. And I agree that I think it ought to go as it is now to referendum. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yes, John, did you want to say anything, John Townsend?
Well, only to add, I do think that we ought to be congratulating the people. There's obviously a group of people there who've got this together. It's an incredible amount of hard work, and I think that they should know that how much we appreciate the work they've done. I just hope that when it comes into the planning matters, that people pay attention to what they've said.
Thank you. I agree. I think what is quite nice is the fact that although it can't go out to referendum at the moment because of the COVID situation, at least if an application comes up, I think I'm right, Alan, that you said that it will be given weight.
That's correct. Yeah, government guidance in relation to neighbourhood planning was amended last year to take account of the COVID implications, and that concluded that referendums can't take place until at least May this year. That may be longer now, and it says decision-making process where a planning authority has issued a decision detailing its intent to send the neighbourhood plan to referendum, significant weight can be given in a decision-making process. So to it in a decision-making process, yeah.
So if nobody else has any comments to make, I think I need a proposer and a seconder, don't I, to go forward. Could I have a proposer? Elaine, thank you very much. And a seconder. Thank you, Bob Atkinson. So the meeting then does recommend to approve, sorry, I have to move my page. Members to consider, no, I'm recommending to approve the modifications recommended by the examiner of the Ashton Neighbourhood Plan as set out in Appendix 1, and agree that the plan, including those modifications, should proceed to referendum. So we have a proposer, a seconder. Do we all agree? Can I have a show of hands? That'd be nice. Thank you very much. Item 7, infrastructure funding statement, please. And again, I think this is Alan.
It is, Chair. Thank you very much. Infrastructure funding statements, item 7. An infrastructure funding statement is a new requirement placed upon the council through the SIL regulations, something which as of 31st of December last year, we have to produce annually. The statement gives it publishes a statement of fact in relation to the council's past spending under SIL and section 106 for a 12-month period, and also requires us to put forward a list of infrastructure projects which SIL could be spent on moving forward. A lot of this is work which the council has already done in terms of publishing SIL and 106 spending previously. We also publish SIL projects and infrastructure types that we could spend SIL on under our Regulation 123 list. So that's been there historically, although this new infrastructure funding statement replaces both of those, with the infrastructure list replacing the Regulation 123 list. The infrastructure list sets out a statement of a list of projects and types of infrastructure that could be wholly or partly funded by SIL. It doesn't represent a list of things that we are committed to actually deliver in the next 12 months, but these are the types of projects that we would consider SIL being spent on in relation to that. And the statement of past spend is a statement of fact. So the meeting is recommended to approve the infrastructure funding statement as set out at Appendix 1, which includes the Council's infrastructure list for the coming year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Alan, comments, please, from anybody. Stephen Hollowell.
Thank you, Chairman. Three things. One, mostly questions and observations, that's all. On big page 100, the table, the third column, I know you put other legislation, but you list like 278, when I would have thought section 38 was more important if I was going to mention anything. That's just an observation though. Alan, on page 101, you're using the abbreviations IDP. I know I'm going to kick myself when you tell me what they stand for, but I just cannot think. What's IDP?
Apologies if I haven't put it in a preceding paragraph explaining what it is. But it's the infrastructure delivery plan that sits adjacent to the joint core strategy and the local plan part 2, and sets out infrastructure priorities, needs in relation to delivering the local plan effectively.
Okay, thanks. I should have known that. The third question is, it's on page 111. There are three things. I wondered where they were. So I'm looking at the table, the first column, infrastructure. Just below in the middle, you've got village hall play area, but I don't know where it is, and wondered. And then the last two lines, off-site sports and recreation. It's obviously something to do with Wootton Fields, but I don't know where, because it's off-site, I don't know where they are. Do you know?
I don't off the top of my head. I can clarify that to you outside of the meeting, but off the top of my head, unfortunately, no.
Okay, thanks very much. That'll do, Alan. Thanks. Thank you,
Anybody
Chair.
else like to make a comment, please? John Townsend, yes. Unmute, please.
I'm back again. Sorry, we seem to have got cut off. Just a comment, really. I'm just looking at page 100, 101, about sustainable transport. And no mention of helping anyway, putting money towards the Farthingale bypass. And I would have thought that anything that was sustainable across our district in the future was the Farthingale bypass. And I just wonder whether, I mean, if there was money to be spent on whatever it may be, it's not directly under us, of course, but it is something which is really important to us. So I wonder what the comments on that might be.
In the broader terms, it's transport infrastructure, including highways improvements, walking and cycling, public transport. So transport infrastructure including, and the bypass is a piece of transport infrastructure. So that could be covered by this, that element of the infrastructure list. I'm not in a position to commit to future spend on anything, I'm afraid. And the table leaves it open for discussion. As we said at the bottom of the table, not guaranteed that we will deliver everything in that table, but it's a category there that could be considered for projects moving forward.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Having a look. Bob Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Regarding Councillor Hollowell's request for information on those off-site sports recreations. If you look at the application numbers, it's 2014 and 2015. Now, these were offset. I'm presuming this is the offset for the St George's Fields that were built down in the dip on the 526 at Wootton, and it's monies that were put aside for football pitches or recreation sites, cricket, anything to do with sport, and some of it was going, or has come to Hackleton Parish Council, and some of it has gone to Wootton Parish Council. So it's been sort of divided down the middle, if you like, to create these off-site pitches, which is all to help the people, the communities that are living currently on St George's Field. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hollowell, has that helped you at all?
Yes, thanks very much. That does fill in those last two. Yeah, thank you very much, Bob.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further comments, please, before we go to the recommendation? Right, ladies and gentlemen, the recommendation is that to adopt the infrastructure funding statement as set out in Appendix 1, which includes the Council's infrastructure list for the coming year. Do we have a proposer and a seconder to the agreement, please? Thank you, Councillor Paul Wiltshire, and a seconder for the recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor John Townsend. Thank you very much. So the recommendation goes ahead. We're now on to item 8, ladies and gentlemen, which is housing supplementary planning document. It's a draft.
Sorry, Chairman. Do we need to have a vote? Do we need to...
Oh, sorry. Did I miss the vote? We better have a vote. Hands, please, everybody. Thank you. That's in agreement. Thank you for reminding me. We go back now to item 8, the housing supplementary planning document, and is in draft form. And this is Mark. This is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. This committee item provides an overview of the draft South Northamptonshire Housing Supplementary Planning Document, or SPD for short, and explains the necessary procedure to take the document forwards towards possible future adoption. As a bit of background, these supplementary planning documents are local documents that add further detail to the policies in the development plan. As such, this housing SPD has been prepared jointly between the planning policy teams and the strategic housing teams, and they're to add detail to the 11 housing policies contained in the South Northamptonshire Part 2 local plan. And a structure has been adopted which directly links each chapter to a policy, with each part of each policy then provided with a step-by-step explanation. The draft housing SPD is attached to this committee report in Appendix A. Whilst the draft SPD does not introduce further policies to those currently adopted by the Council, SPDs are capable of being a material consideration in planning considerations. In order to adopt a document and therefore give the document weight as this material consideration, it must pass through a period of at least 4 weeks formal consultation in line with the Town and Country Planning Regulations 2012. The Council Statement of Community Involvement that was adopted in July 2020 also required the Council to consult on SPDs for a minimum of 4 weeks. In conclusion, the South Northamptonshire Council does not currently have an adopted housing SPD. The draft housing SPD attached in the appendix has been prepared to provide detailed guidance on the housing policies contained in the local plan, and if subsequently adopted, could assist applicants, developers, the public and the local planning authority in the efficient determination of planning applications. It is therefore the Office's recommendation that the committee approve the public consultation of the draft housing SPD to enable stakeholders to be given the opportunity to provide input for consideration into its further amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Comments, ladies and gentlemen, please. This is a very interesting document. Stephen Hollowell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's a very interesting document.
You're still muted, Stephen, or you're muted again.
I'm sorry, it's when I go to my agenda alongside and Zoom cuts out for some weird reason. There are some points I emailed wrongly, I think, to Alan. I should have sent them to Mark, really. I apologise.
You're off again, Stephen.
Stephen, you're off again. No, you're off again.
Okay, I'm there again. I don't know why, but Zoom doesn't seem to allow me to do two things at once. Can't multitask with it. Anyway, Mark, a couple of things. First of all, I just really wanted to make a general point about policy LH4. And I'm talking about the policy itself, not the SPD. I think that policy is proving to be too weak. And we discovered that in planning on planning committee with the Bugbrook Barnes application. Basically, what is happening there is what we're saying is that they can convert barns in the middle of nowhere to dwellings as long as you don't have to demolish the complete building. What it means is that a developer can get away with demolishing 9/10 of the building, leave a bit of a wall standing with no proper foundations, but it's good enough. And that was really confirmed by the inspector when they went to appeal. And it was LH4 that really, I think, led us down. And I think at some point in the future, somebody ought to look at that again. On page 149, 515A, we're talking there about a design code, about the applicant producing a design code. And that seems to me to be wrong. We've paid out a lot of money for a design guide for the district. And I don't see the point then in allowing somebody who's going to build in open countryside to come along with their own design code. If they want to build something which is innovative, then it shouldn't really be under that policy. There is another policy there for new and innovative designs and so on. So I'm rather kind of a little confused about that one. And then forgive me if I just drop out again for a minute while I move on. Yeah, on page 165, paragraph 912, and this is my final point. It's to do with the length of tenancy that we're talking about here for build to rent. What we're saying is the same as the NPPF. They're saying we should offer, or they should offer, a minimum tenancy of 3 years. But in the real world, I don't think that works, because I think we ought to look to the RPs for advice on this. But most landlords, initially, they will only give a maximum of a 1-year tenancy. It's like a trial, an introductory tenancy. And if things go well, then the RPs, I believe, offer a 5-year tenancy. And I feel we should be fitting in more with the housing associations than with the NPPF in this case. But I'm willing to suggestions from other members, or Jim or Mark. And that's all I've got to say, Chairman. Sorry about the...
Yeah, no, thank you. If I go first to the first point you raised about LH4, I mean, what this SPD is doing is basically trying to add some weight to the existing policies. So it can't actually change the policies that the council has adopted. However, I would like to point out that it does set out at one stage that it provides some guidance on how we would look at houses in that situation. So if it were to become a material consideration in the future, that's something that could be considered. In respect of the design code, this is actually for schemes such as the large or larger schemes for self-build, and perhaps where people are taking a more individual approach to the design of their houses, such as Graven Hill and in Bicester. And what we're looking to do is not have the same guidance necessarily that currently exists, which, although that will complement it, but to set out the parameters for what people who are perhaps a bit more ambitious in their designs need to, the parameters that they need to stay within to ensure that it blends in with the countryside. With respect to length of tenancy, this actually refers to policy LH9. Basically, this is build to rent, but it's not necessarily for registered providers. It's a product whereby people actively choose to rent, and they're usually sponsored by things like insurance companies, and they provide the finance for them. And then the people who occupy the properties, although they're still expected to provide affordable housing as part of the development, there's no market housing for purchase provided as part of the development. So all the houses are for rent. And basically what we've been trying to do is stick to the government's guidance in respect of such rental products. So does that answer any of your questions? Or?
You've answered the questions, but particularly on the tenancy thing, I still feel that the NPPF is out of step on that one particular thing. And although this is not, we're not talking about housing associations here, I think that you'll find the same is with private rented, that you will not get a 3-year tenancy first time. I think it's something you probably ought to look into at the very least. If you can satisfy yourself in your own mind that that landlords, quite prepared to offer 3-year initial leases, then fine, go for it. But I'd be interested to know what you do discover. But that's my main point there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that we would look at in the next stage of the document, basically. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any more comments, please, or comments on what Stephen, Marianne? Unmute.
I agree with Stephen entirely about it. It would be much easier and simpler for landlords to have an initial year's tenancy, and it's worked with the housing associations. So why make it more difficult for everybody? So I would like the officers to do rather more than look at it. Do something about it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any further comments? John Townsend.
Yeah, actually, I would agree. I would agree with Stephen and Marianne on that as well. I think you do need to look at it. You get a new tenant a year is quite a. You just don't know, and then you establish a relationship, and then off you go, and they should be all right. But I'd like to go back also to Stephen's point about barns, etc. I mean, actually looking at this paper, there's now more exceptions to for busting the confines lines than you believe possible at the moment. I mean, I do rather despair of the future of our confines lines. They've really held us together for many, many years and have done a very, very good job across the district. And I hate to think what's going to happen in the future, because any developer looking at them will be rubbing his hands with glee, I would suggest, and thinking all the little exceptions he can do. But I particularly draw attention to one point which did come in, which was on page 139 on Barnes. Oh God, sorry, there we are. In the second paragraph, the reuse buildings to residential use can require provision of new access roads, new curtilages, etc. It goes on about how outstanding fences, walls. That's all good stuff. But actually, these field barns, one of the first things they've got to get is the electrics. And the first thing that happens is electric pylons go right across open countryside, and that is the first thing that destroys the openness of our countryside. So I'd like some reference put in there about electric, about the supply of electric, as to how it's going to be. It should really go underground, and it should be an expense which, when they develop these houses, they go for a fortune, and they need to be properly planned. And I suggest that includes having electrics underground.
Thank you. Any further comments? Yes, Martin Johns.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I mean, I certainly agree with Councillor Townsend on that last point. We did have I recall a fairly recent application. I think it went to appeal, and the inspector found against us in relation to our suggestion that power cable should be put underground. And I think that's quite right. In some locations, you know, the overhead cables can be extremely unsightly, and also in respect of how much of a barn has to be retained. Again, we've seen planning committee in recent times where barns have had approval for conversion, and then the applicant has come back and said, oh, well, it's a very old barn, it didn't have the foundations strong enough, so we had to take down further walls. So I think there does need to be some tightening up there, which I would recommend. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to make a comment? Marianne.
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. I'm talking about the self-build houses. I find it very worrying that we are saying that you can have 10 houses that don't have to have any uniformity of design. And I would have liked to have suggested, if we could, that it was 5 houses. And my other thing that I would also suggest is that the developers ought to find out in advance if they have buyers for their right to buy, the right to build houses, because otherwise we know only too well with pubs that they say they've tried as hard as they can, but they really haven't. So as long as they, is there any reason why we shouldn't see that they have at least 50% of the people in advance before they start getting planning permission?
Thank
you. There were 2 questions there.
That's fine, thank you. Mark.
Yes, I mean, in respect of changing from 10 to 5, I think it would actually require a change in policy, which is what this SPD isn't actually here to do. The policies have been adopted by the council, and this is to add bones to the policies that have been adopted. So we can't actually create new policies, is my understanding. In respect of the second part, could I just clarify which part of the SPD you were referring to?
Is this to Marianne?
Yes, it's on page 150. It says that they don't, it goes into a long rigmarole if they can't actually manage to sell them once they've got planning permission.
Ah, yes. Basically, the self-build we regulations. What we normally do is we the council has to, in accordance with policy LH5, my understanding is that the council only requires that there's a demand in the council area, and to that end we actually hold a self-build housing register, and if the demand didn't exist in the area, then it would be expected that the planning approval would not occur in the first place, because they have to demonstrate demand in accordance with the self-build register.
And that would include the fact, is it the whole register, or is it just the people who want to build, have a house in that particular area?
Well, the register can be broken down. Although the website has a summary of what's on the register, we actually have the details behind that and each person who is on the register and their personal circumstances. And so when applications come in for self-build houses, we can actually advise the planning officers if there is a demand in that particular area.
Thank you.
I'm looking for anybody else. Yes, Stephen Hollowell.
It's just a general observation, really, Chairman. The local plan part 2, I think we spent 7 years working on it, and we chewed it up. We sliced it one way, sliced it another, and then in the latest stages of it, suddenly central government appeared with all of these new housing products that we had to kind of take on board. And although they went through the minimum statutory amount of consultation, I don't think they had anything like the depth of consultation and thought that we gave to the rest of the plan. And so I think LH4 and LH5 are 2 examples where now that we're actually using them, we're finding that there are little tiny things there that are not really quite as we would have wished them to have been. And I think it's difficult. The local plan's probably not going to be reviewed for another 4.5 years by the new council. Goodness knows what they'll do with it anyway. But I think it is unfortunate that these new ideas like build to rent and so on. It's sad that they're very important. They're outside village confines, a lot of these things, and yet we've not really had the opportunity to chew them over quite to the extent that I would have liked anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. John Townsend.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I'd like to know, is there anything you can do about electric pylons and such like? I mean, can we add that bit of wording, or have you just conveniently forgotten that is what I said?
No, we can add a bit of wording in respect of electric pylons. The choice for committee would be whether we did it before we went out to consultation or whether we did it as part of the consultation. I suppose that's.
I think it will be done as part of the consultation. I mean, I do absolutely agree with Stephen that these things. I mean, this thing of these individual houses. Suddenly, I mean, we know nothing about it, and only when we got that application to the last committee did we really get into the nitty gritty of what this policy was about. But it's just come in and have been adopted by our officers, and I think a lot of permissions have already been given before we knew what happened. And I think we're not entirely happy about it all. And certainly this thing of all these exceptions, one after the other. I mean, there's about 6 of them, I think. We've never had them before, and then we've just suddenly got them. So anyway, the electrics is something that I particularly find irritating.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Chairman?
Please.
There's a couple of points I would make. One is that I don't think it's fair to suggest that officers have introduced these policies at the last minute and without talking to this committee about it. It went through the examination in public as well, and it went to full council as a complete document. So that there has been consultation, there has been opportunities to have a say about it. I think the second point I would make is that where government changes national rules, so if we take barn conversions, for instance, the government changes the national rule and introduce Class Q, the infamous Class Q, to allow barn conversions in principle, subject to things like if you don't have to replace all of the walls, if you can keep one of the walls, then maybe that's not substantial rebuilding. The court has to clarify what that means. That's a fallback position. So if an applicant comes to us and they say, so here's your local plan policy for barn conversions, and here's the central government's policy on it, there's a fallback position. So immediately it weakens our position of our policy, which means that sometimes an applicant will say, well, I'll just go down the Class Q route then in the first place. So there is a bit of we have to strike a balance. There's a bit of a tension, and in that circumstance, we're not always going to get the exact outcome that we want. And I would say my final comment would be officers, I think, share the frustration of members about that. However, that's what planning is at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any more comments people would like
to say? More's the pity is all I can say.
I think you're right, John. Absolutely.
But I do think, sorry, just to follow on that one, is that we can tighten it where we can tighten up, or at least we have to state what we think. And if then we get beaten by our government, well, then that's something we can't do much about.
Yep, good. Marianne.
So have the officers agreed that they would say that those pylons should go underground? Because, I mean, that is really important, because it's the first thing that does ruin the countryside. And they ought to know that, because otherwise they'll be appealing like mad. So it ought to be in the plan. And I'm sure we can't say that that wasn't policy, that we can add it. So can I just hear that they did agree that they'd do something about that?
Thank you.
I think we've agreed that we will we'll put some extra wording in to address that issue into the consultation draft.
Yes, please, before it goes out. Yes, because I think everybody is quite correct. It's quite important now to do something like that. So yes, please. Any further comments, please? Yes, Martin Johns.
Yes, Jim, it was just that I think members, there's no criticism, certainly from me, of officers in terms of we've had the opportunity to raise these issues before. It's just that some recent applications, I think, have alerted us to some of the problems, and I think that's why we're raising them tonight.
Absolutely agree. Thank you very much for saying that. Elaine Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just going on with the idea of making sure that all the electrics are underground, can we also add to that that we are not in favour of these wind turbines as well, because they're another blot on the landscape?
That would be nice. I can't stand them.
That might be a little bit more difficult, because I think in some cases wind turbines don't require planning. They don't require permission, I don't think. But what we will do, I will commit that we look at it and we see whether there is something that we can do, and we'll contact Council Wiltshire outside of this meeting with the findings.
That would be good.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. You're happy with that, Elaine? Good. Anybody else? No? Right, then we come to the recommendation of the report, everybody, which is going to take into account about undergrounding the cables in particular. Our recommendation is to approve the draft South Northamptonshire Housing Supplementary Planning Document and the commencement of a 4-week period of public consultation on the draft South Northamptonshire Housing SPD. Do I have somebody who's going to propose that? Please, Marianne, thank you very much. And a seconder, please. I can't see anybody's hand. Elaine Wiltshire. Sorry, thank you very much, Elaine. Didn't see you. Are we in agreement? Could we have your hands up, please, if you're in agreement with adopting it? Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Well, I think we come to item 9, don't we, on the agenda, which is the, if I can find the page, which is our programme, isn't it? Our work programme. Alan, would you like to give us a rundown?
Indeed, yeah, of course. 4 items, I think. We'll start with the, hopefully, subject to consultation, the housing SPD coming back to members to consider in the next meeting. Also, Dean's Hanger Village Design Guide, which you looked at in December, which is currently out for consultation. So hopefully we'll have a response to that for you again in March. Slapton Conservation Area, which we looked at in the autumn. Consultations concluding on that. That should be coming back as well. Our usual quarterly neighbourhood planning update. I'm aware there's some activity and some progression from a few parishes at the moment, so that'll be an interesting update to see where we are with those. I think that was it for the coming agenda. So 4 items, certainly a bit of a mixture there, but some useful stuff to sign off after some work and previous discussions.
It will, and that's on the 17th of March.
It is.
Anybody got anything they would like to say before I close the meeting? No? Well, thank you everybody for attending our meeting today. I found it very interesting, and thank you very much for your comments. And I look forward to seeing you on the 17th of March. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.